so again, thank you all so much for joining us here tonight for When Objects Talk Back, a look into haunted objects and paranormal research with Satori Hayes. No, that's my last name. Satori, how am I pronouncing this? Hawes?
Hawes, yes.
Yeah, I was so concerned about your first name, I screwed up your last name. So Satori Hawes and Cody Ray DesBiens.
Wow, great.
I got DesBiens right, so that's something. Right, so tonight we're joined by paranormal Cuppy. I said Cuppy. Okay. We're joined by paranormal couple, Cody Ray and Satori, from Travel Channel's Ghost Nation, as they dive deep into the phenomena of haunted objects. During this presentation, you will have the chance to see some of the alleged haunted objects that have been recovered by Cody and Satori during their actual paranormal investigations. Both Satori and Cody are investigators with the world-renowned paranormal investigation team called TAPS. That's an acronym that stands for the Atlantic Paranormal Society. And that society was actually founded by Satori's father, Jason, back in 1990. And again, tonight's presentation is sponsored by the Friends of the Tewksbury Library. So all 70 of us or so watching live, and I'm sure the hundreds that are going to watch on YouTube after the fact. Let's give a big round of applause to Cody and Satori for joining us here tonight. And guys, you can take it away. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Robert. And thanks again to the Friends of the Library for sponsoring this and having us tonight. And thank you all for coming. I hope all of you are healthy and your families are healthy. I know this is a really difficult and strange time for our world, but hopefully it starts getting back to normal and maybe we can take your mind off of everything for at least an hour.
We're going to try to make it as fun as possible, probably some spooky stories, so kick back and get ready to watch.
Yeah, and like Robert said, if you have any questions throughout, just leave them in the chat and hopefully we'll get to them at the end here. So let's see if we can start this up here. All righty.
Who we are. So my name is Satori Hawes. I was already introduced, but I am a lifelong investigator. I've actually been involved in the paranormal my entire life. My dad founded the Atlantic Paranormal Society before I was even born. So paranormal was in my family before I was even thought about. And so when my father got the show in roughly 2004, he started a show called Ghost Hunters, which was widely known. I really started to see my father go out and help people. And so I knew growing up in this household, that's really what I wanted to do. I wanted to follow in his footsteps and help people. I'm very emotional. I take an emotional social approach when it comes to investigating. Cody's kind of the tech whiz, right?
Yes.
So I like to kind of feel things out and be the emotional social person.
Yeah, and I've been investigating supernatural phenomena for about 10 years now, 6 of which has been with the TAPS team. I've been to hundreds of locations all around the United States, mainly in New England, helping out residential homes, people who have problems in their houses, claiming that, they're scared. These are scared families that were coming in to help. And like Tori said, I like to take the more technical side of technical approach to things. I've always been a techie guy. I like to document as much data as I can when we're on investigations, to someday hopefully turn this field into a legitimate science. Right now, it's more on the line of a pseudoscience, but we're getting there. We definitely collected a lot of data over the years, and hopefully, we'll get somewhere.
I'm excited to see where this goes.
Cool. All righty.
All right. So how we got started.
So everybody in the paranormal field usually has some sort of experience that gets them interested in the topic. And for me, I was around 8 years old in the house I grew up in North Attleboro, Massachusetts. And I seen some really strange things. I woke up in the middle of the night. I wasn't feeling that well, so I went into my parents' bedroom, and like any 8-year-old would do, I went to my mom and said I didn't feel well. So she, invited me to stay the night in her room, and I climbed right in between my mom and my dad, and I tried falling asleep, and I couldn't fall asleep. I kept tossing and turning, and finally I opened my eyes, and I was petrified at what I saw. It's burned into my mind. I saw a bunch of men circling the bed. They were going through the wall on the left side of the bed. gliding around the bed and then going through the wall on the right side of the bed, and just kept circling around. And one thing I remember distinctly is seeing the TV right through one of the person's heads on the other side of them, sitting on my dad's bureau. It was one of those big box TVs, and they were all mumbling something all at the same time that I couldn't understand. And that's what really got me interested in EVP, electronic voice phenomena, spirit voices, and the documentation of those types of voices. And that experience kind of got the ball rolling, opened up the door to a whole new realm of unexplained. And I started taking out books at the library. The internet was a big thing, starting to get a big thing then. And, I just wanted to learn everything I possibly could. And then I started learning about haunted objects, which we're going to get into tonight.
So how I got started, I kind of grew up, like I said, in this field my entire life. So my family kind of taught me it was something that I should, kind of get used to. It's something that obviously you acknowledge it's there. You never show you're afraid of it. You always try to keep your head straight and your feet on the ground and take it head on. So I grew up with this my entire life, knowing that the paranormal was real and that it was nothing to really be afraid of. So I lived at a house in Warwick, and this is kind of where my first experiences started. I was a couple years old, and actually in that photo, about that age with my dad. And some of the first experiences I had, I would tell my mom I repeatedly saw butterflies flying around my room. I would see butterflies all over the place, following me, talking to me. And my mom never understood why I saw butterflies. And so she just kind of went, oh, it's a child wild imagination, probably. But then one day I wore a shirt and I said, Mom, look, it's the butterflies. And it was an angel on the shirt. So that kind of made my mom realize that I was kind of in tune in this field, and that I really, even though I was a child, I was going to probably get involved in this field. I also was afraid in the bathtub one day. This is around the same time. And I told my mom, I can't take a bath. I can't take a bath. And she says, why? Why can't you take a bath? And my excuse was, there's a little boy calling for help in the drain. He's looking for his mommy. So little experiences like that would have my mom think like, wow, she's really in tune with the paranormal. So ever since, we lived in a haunted hotel for many years of my childhood. I just grew up around this everywhere I was. I used to follow my dad everywhere. And that's what got me started, these few experiences.
Yeah, so that's really interesting because you grew up with it. And myself, I grew up in a Catholic household, mm-hmm. and I was introduced to it through having an experience. So it's great when both of us come together and investigate, because we have two different sides of the story here. But when we go into these homes and get called into the homes here, we have to identify the haunting. And this is where the haunted object thing starts to come into play. Not every house we go to has a haunted object. They're actually pretty rare to come across a home that has a haunted object. So the first type of haunting we come across is something called a residual haunting. And this is a haunted house. A lot of times you hear stories of spirits walking through walls and things of that nature and not paying attention to the living people. And then if you look back in the blueprints, there used to be a door where that wall is now. So those type of spirits, they're not intelligent in any way. They're just kind of imprinted on the property. They're imprinted on the house, and they're just kind of doing their own thing. They pay no attention to the living people, and you can't communicate with them because they're in their own world. They used to use this analogy like it's a VHS tape that just keeps replaying itself over and over and over again, and there's no control. Maybe think of something that you do every day. You wake up in the morning, you have a routine. Maybe you wake up, you brush your teeth, go downstairs, have a cup of coffee. You do that every day. It's theorized that those actions get imprinted into the home itself. And that's what a residual spirit is, something that's imprinted. It's not your physical spirit. It's just an imprint of your spirit on the property.
One of the most famous cases, residual haunting, is actually, a lot of people claim to see residual hauntings at Gettysburg and battlefields like that. They tend to see people in Civil War clothing, tend to see people fighting. They tend to see people saying things that may have happened during the time, making absolutely no sense. So a lot of people think that a good example of residual haunting is, for instance, Gettysburg, the War of Gettysburg. That moves on to an intelligent haunting. An intelligent haunting is Intelligent haunting is something that is there. It actually sees you, it communicates, it shows itself, it understands what you're saying, and it tries to relay the message. So for instance, if you're recording something and you ask a question like, what's your name? And you get the name back like Bill, that obviously they're there, they understand what you're asking them, and they're communicating. So that's an example of an intelligent haunting.
Yeah, and that's probably one of the most common hauntings we run into. Especially our most data collected is on audio EVP, like I said, basically a fancy term for spirit voices. And you know, these are the people like you and me. Once we pass on, they come back and visit their homes. At least that's what we think is happening by the data that we've collected. They're just normal people that have passed on, and they come and visit their families. The next type of haunting is an inhuman haunting. And right when you hear inhuman, a lot of people think negative, demons, the devil. But inhuman actually encompasses a whole realm of things, not just bad. It actually encompasses angelic, angels.
Spirit guides, higher powers of some sort, whatever you really believe in. Every culture has some form of an inhuman spirit, both good and evil.
Elementals, earth spirits, things of that nature. So it really encompasses a whole blanket of things. It's really interesting, really, really interesting.
And what we're going to be talking about tonight is object attachment. So what this is a spirit may have in life passed away and they really loved something. And when they passed away, they wanted to check up on it. So that's an example of an object attachment. There are also many object attachments that people may think are negative or, you know, summoned to that object. Pretty much an object attachment summed up is a physical object that has been possessed or taken over by a spirit.
Great. All right, and I'm going to throw this remote out the window because it's not working. All right, so let's go over here and do that. So the origin of haunted objects. So this actually dates back a long time to things that you probably wouldn't expect. So the origin of haunted objects dates back to the creation of what's called poppets, effigies, and voodoo dolls. Now you probably automatically think, wow, that sounds scary, because everybody knows voodoo and they automatically compare it to something bad. But you'll find out that it's not so bad. Everything has its good side. So around 1100 BC, before Christ, and ancient Egypt times, this is the time that Ramses III was ruling over Egypt. A lot of his enemies, some were even other high rulers at the time.
Harem women, higher officials.
They would create these wax figures, like the one that's pictured on the slide right here, that would interpret the pharaoh. It would represent the pharaoh himself. And they didn't like him. They wanted him dead. So they would perform these rituals, and in hopes that, you know, they would eventually kill the pharaoh by doing these voodoo rituals. They would build what's called a poppet or an effigy out of wax, and because they wanted him dead, they would destroy it. They would do things like melt it and cut it up and stomp on it. And they just did everything to hurt this man. And they truly believed that this is something that would work. Other Egyptians would use these poppet dolls for religious and ceremonial purposes. If somebody in the community there wasn't going along with their beliefs of gods and goddesses, they would build an effigy of that particular person and curse them. That would be their punishment. They would put a curse over them because they weren't going along with what they believed. There were also people that they believed were possessed by evil, by the devil, and they built poppets of them to rid them of these evil spirits.
So this list, what you're going to see is a lot of these different cultures had the same method of creating these haunted objects or cursed objects in this origin. So around 200 BC in Greece, there's something called sympathetic magic. So what that is kind of the same gist as the Egyptians. They would take dolls or effigies, they would create them, and they would do a ritual, and either the ritual would be something positive, like they would make an effigy or a doll in order to make somebody fall in love with the person who asked for it. Or if they were opposing somebody in war, they wanted to make sure they won the war. So what they would do is make a doll or an effigy of the opponents and burn them and destroy them to try to make sure that they win in this war.
Now, a lot of these dolls, they were usually made of fabric. Now, these are some examples of dolls of current day voodoo, which Tori's going to talk about in a second here. But one represents good and one represents bad. These were collected on a educational trip to New Orleans a few years back. And This one was actually used in a ceremony for a person. Not sure what the intentions were on this, but by the way the doll looks, it wasn't good intentions for whatever this person did. On the other side of things, this is a health doll. This doll represents good health. And a lot of these dolls, they're made of fabric. You can make them out of wood, clay, and then they fill them with different types of herbs. And in the situation that Tori was just speaking of love, if you wanted to fall in love with somebody, you would go to the practitioner and tell the person, who you would want to fall in love with. And then they would make the effigy for that person. They would represent that person. So maybe you would want a lock of that person's hair or something they belong to, maybe a piece of their clothing. And then they would stuff it inside of the doll. And then that doll would basically be a great representation of the living person itself. They would perform a ceremony that would connect the doll to the person. And then you have a voodoo doll, basically.
So that brings us to the 16th century, which actually you started to see cultures like Haitian voodoo, where voodoo was starting to come into the light, and is the voodoo that we know today in this culture. And you go to New Orleans and you see voodoo dolls. This is kind of where it started. 16th century Haitian voodoo. They would make dolls or effigies, also known as voodoo dolls, for both good and bad, like Cody stated. So they'd make one with good herbs for health. If somebody in your family was dying, they would make a voodoo doll to assure that they get better. And if you hated somebody or you had spite against somebody, they would make a curse doll. And some of them were actually very, very aggressive. Some of them even tried to cause death. So there's a wide range there. And then we go to the 20th century. This is where you start to see the spiritualist movement. You start to see like early 1900s, 1800s, people starting to investigate. And you start to see, the paranormal investigators start to come out. And this is where we see a lot of our possessed objects we even have today. Some of our possessed objects behind us are very old from these time periods.
Yeah, and like Tori was saying, you have the whole formation of actual teams going into homes. In England with the Society for Psychical Research, you have educated individuals going into homes, doing research, trying to find the basis of supernatural phenomena that's occurring in homes and in buildings. And in some of those cases, they would theorize that an object was the catalyst for the haunting itself. It's only theory, but everything would always point to these objects, and then they would try backing up with evidence, which we'll give some examples of on how we do that later in the presentation for sure.
Awesome.
You also have movies. A lot of movies come out and make the whole idea of a haunted object really popular with pop culture and things of that nature. So when we go into a home, we need to identify the object.
So identifying the object may sound very hard, but really what it is if you start to experience paranormal activity, you sit down, you level yourself, and you think, what did I get around the time that this activity started happening? Maybe you went to an estate sale or a yard sale of some sort. Maybe your family gave you something passed down to you. You have to sit down and really think about, when did I get the activity? When did the activity start? When did I get the objects? And really try to correlate. So then you have to take a look at the new items in your homes. Many of them are antiques.
Yeah, we've been to so many locations where, people have gone to an antique shop and brought something home, and all of a sudden stuff starts happening. Like I said, it's really rare that an object itself is the catalyst for the haunting. Usually it's intelligent spirits or residual spirits. Even inhuman is extremely rare. But it does happen. We have come across it. As you can see, we've acquired quite the collection here of strange stuff.
And there's the occasional, like we said, it's rare, but sometimes objects come into the home and there can be negative energy and negative activity happening. I mean, some people say that they get Ouija boards and they mess around with these Ouija boards, and then they're starting to get some negative energy. You're seeing some negative beings that are harming them. So it's very rare that anything is, inhuman or negative, but it does happen. And we have taken some of those off the hands for people.
So yeah, right now we're going to look into some of the more famous haunted objects that you probably have heard of in pop culture today, movies and things of that nature.
Some of my favorites. We have Annabelle, also known from the Conjuring series and the Annabelle series. Annabelle Comes Home, Annabelle Creation, all these movies.
And Robert the Doll, Dybbuk Box, and the Djinn, which might surprise you.
Yes. So that brings us to Annabelle.
So Annabelle was given to a nursing student in the 1970s.
So as soon as this nursing student got the doll, she started to experience some strange things. She started to see the doll move around, and some weird notes written, just very weird things. She didn't feel comfortable with this doll, which led her to call in a medium, and the medium claimed that the doll was actually inhabited by a young girl named Annabelle Higgins.
Yeah, and like Tori said, a lot of strange things started to happen. They would find notes written on parchment paper that was made years and years prior to when this event took place. And on the parchment paper would be little notes. They would try throwing the doll away because they didn't want it anymore, and it would somehow end up back inside of the apartment.
Actually, one of the most frightening things that happened to make them call the Warrens was there was a claim that a young man was at the house with them, and he actually didn't believe that this doll was evil in any way. And he fell asleep and actually had a dream that Annabelle was crawling up his leg, and he woke up and had scratches on him, which warranted a call to the Warrens.
Now, when the Warrens came in, they did their investigation, and ultimately, if you've seen the movies, they ended up taking it to their occult museum in Connecticut. Now, if you're looking at the picture here on the slide, the real Annabelle doll is on the left-hand side, and the movie version is on the right. And as you can see, Hollywood took a big they put a lot of their Hollywood magic into the movie for sure and made it look a lot creepier than what it really is. But one of the strange things that Ed Warren always talked about at his museum, a strange story, was there was a couple. So this museum used to be open to the public. It's no longer open now due to zoning issues and things of that nature. But it was open to the public, and Ed Warren himself used to give tours to people. And so they would come in and look at the objects. And one gentleman came in one day with his girlfriend. This is Ed Warren's story, of course. And he didn't believe the whole Annabelle story at all. And he walked up to the doll, which wasn't in glass at that time, and tried picking it up and poking at it, and said, if this doll is truly possessed by something evil, let it do something to me right now, because I don't believe that. Yeah, don't do that. Even if you, I mean, why even bother chancing it, But he did this, and Ed Warren was furious that the gentleman had done this and kicked him out. And as he's walking out of the museum, he's yelling and waving his hands, saying, see, nothing happened to me. The doll's not possessed. It's a bunch of junk and just a doll. So he hops on his motorcycle and leaves. So the next day, Ed Warren's looking at the newspaper and sees that there's a motorcycle accident. And he's like, wow, that's interesting. Well, come to find out, it was that gentleman that was taunting Annabelle. He had gotten in a motorcycle accident and died at the scene, and his girlfriend survived the crash and ended up calling Ed, supposedly, and totally was convinced that this was the doll's doing that killed her boyfriend.
Obviously, there is no proof, and there may never be proof that this incident correlates. It is a coincidence that it did happen, though, so we always like to keep an open mind.
Absolutely. All right, next object, Robert the doll.
I love this story, Robert the doll. So Robert Eugene, he went by Gene, was given this doll as a gift in the early 1900s as he was a young boy. So Gene actually went by Gene, and this is a claim, because Robert the doll wanted to take his name of Robert. So he decided to go by Gene in order to make the doll happy.
Yeah, and things started going wrong in the home. Things would start breaking. Maybe a vase would fall off the table and it would break. They would start having a string of bad luck, and everything that was happening, Gene was blaming the doll on, and it was starting to really freak him out and freak the family out.
So eventually, after the parents and the family were a little uncomfortable, Robert was nailed shut in a box and left in the attic as the family moved. I believe Robert did studies in France, and his family moved to France, and he eventually moved back.
Yeah, he eventually moved back to the house he grew up in. It was still their family home. And when he moved back with his new wife that he married in Paris, they found the box in the attic with Robert the doll in it. And, so he opened the box back up and lived with Robert for a while until 1974.
Yeah, well, when Gene left for France, he actually kind of grew out of this phase that the family thought he had. He was completely normal. When he came back, his wife said that he was being very strange. He actually had a room left aside for Robert. It was a full-sized room included with tables and chairs. She also claimed that Gene insisted that Robert ate first at the dinner table every night. And every night she would hear Jean talking to Robert in the living room by themselves, just for no reason at all. She'd never hear any responses. It was almost as if Jean was kind of possessed by this doll. Like he was super close to this doll.
Absolutely. And we have run into situations where we have determined that there was psychological issues with a person. And if that happened in this case, we're not really sure. But we do have on our team, we do have contacts with psychologists and things of that nature. If we ever run into that situation, we can bring in professionals to help us out.
Yeah, what makes this case especially strange is in 1974, when Jean was found dead in the attic with Robert was actually on top of Jean with both of his tiny little doll hands on each side of Jean's throat, almost as if he had strangled him to death. This is what the wife found.
So the doll now is now in a museum in Florida, and you can actually go and visit it. And many people have visited it. And one of the things is you have to ask permission to take his picture, because I guess people have taken his picture and bad luck has happened to them as soon as they've left the museum.
Yeah, there's plenty of cases. Actually, if you go to the museum, there are actually taped to the wall by his case hundreds of letters from people saying, "I'm sorry, I took a photo of you without your permission. I came home, my animals have died, my family is sick, my family got in a car accident," just complete crazy scenarios, and saying, "Please forgive me. I beg you to forgive me. I'll delete the photos. Just please take this bad luck away, Robert."
Now, another thing is in their gift shop there, they sell a little stuffed, it looks like a stuffed animal of the doll, a little representation of the doll that you can purchase. And a lot of people who have purchased this little stuffed Robert have claimed that they've had paranormal activity in their house after they brought it in. Now, could this doll be acting as an effigy like the Egyptians used to do because it represents Robert the doll? Could this be acting kind of as a catalyst for paranormal activity? Who knows? We have to take this stuff with a grain of salt. It's just claims that have been happening over the years here.
Mm-hmm.
Let's move on to the Dybbuk box.
Okay, so the Dybbuk box, in Jewish mythology, a Dybbuk is a malicious possessing spirit believed to be the dislocated soul of a deceased person. Whether they are inhuman or not, it doesn't really say. It just says a deceased individual. So it makes you tend to believe that it was actually a person in life.
In the box, the Dybbuk box term first came across by a guy named Kevin Manis. And he purchased this box in 2001 through an estate sale. And right away, he started getting evil feelings, very dark feelings coming off of the box. And it was claimed to have belonged to a survivor of the Holocaust in Poland. So things of this nature, if the box truly belonged to a Holocaust survivor, that's a lot of tragedy, of course. And we find when there's situations dealing with a lot of tragedy involving an object, that's the perfect situation to have a haunting.
Now, there were some worries that this box was actually used in rituals, because I believe the claim was when opening this box, there were some locks of hair and other objects inside to tend to believe that there's a ritual was done to make it seem like there was a demonic possession over the box. And this box is now known as the famous Dybbuk box that currently belongs to Zach Bagans in his haunted museum.
Yeah, so if you do watch the Travel Channel and watch one of the sister shows that are featured on the channel we're on, you probably have seen this box on a few of his episodes. So the next one is kind of a surprise here. So Aladdin. So this is really brought into pop culture here, and something that children will recognize. So the genie and his magic lamp. So in Arabic, genies were also known as jinns, and they were mythological creatures dating back on record to about 2400 BC. In the Quran, it stated that these beings were created out of fire and scorching wind. Sounds, pretty scary, of course. And these beings were very intelligent and free-willed creatures. They not all of them were bad, but there were times that some of them could be bad. And, they were empowered with magical powers. They could grant wishes to some people, depending on which type of jinn you ran into. And there are some legends and stories that have been passed down throughout the years. For an example, in the Islamic Golden Age, there were a few travelers that were looking for a vessel that supposedly held the genie of King Solomon. And you can actually look this stuff up and read it. It all has a part in history that has just evolved over time.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing how history can actually teach you something like this. Even if it's in a kid's movie, it actually happened. It was actually a thing.
So now we're going to get into some of the stuff we've run into in our museum here, our little museum that we've collected. Dozens of items that we've collected over the years. Again, this stuff is rare to come by, but we've done hundreds of investigations, and we do come across this stuff, and people just send us stuff sometimes that they believe is haunted.
Yeah, we never make somebody pay us to take it off their hands. We never pay anybody to take these objects. It is just a 100% simple exchange. If someone feels uncomfortable with something in their home, they bring it here. And if they ever need it back, we have some family heirloom items here as well. We'd like to tell them that we have it here and we're always willing to give it back.
Yeah, and not everything in the museum is haunted per se. We do have some objects from haunted locations, famous haunted locations around the world. And we have some occult paraphernalia that's been used in dark arts and things of that nature that have summoned these types of things, or supposedly summoned these types of things. So now we're going to dive into some of the stuff and the stories behind each of them for sure. All right, let's do this. So the African tribal mask here.
So this African tribal mask was actually, So this African tribal mask, there are many claims that are associated with this mask. There are deep and raspy voices heard, a campfire smell, changes in EMF levels and spikes, and images of tribal dancing and fire. Do you want to elaborate?
So I acquired this mask on one of the educational trips to Louisiana. I believe it was my second trip down there. And I love to learn about different religions and different people that are involved in the paranormal and how they practice their different practices. And of course, I was learning about voodoo in New Orleans, and I was talking to a voodoo priestess, interviewing different ones, and witch doctors. If you hear some dogs barking, I have some dogs here upstairs. But this particular mask, so of course, it was well known that we collected haunted objects and things of that nature. And he had brought up the story of 6 masks that he had brought over from Africa to New Orleans about 25 years ago now. And this was one of those 6 masks. And as he brought them out and showed them to me, he laid them out on a table. And I asked him, did he get any strange feelings off any of the masks here on the table? And he pointed to this one. And he says, I've kept this one in a box because I just don't like it. I get a bad feeling off of it. And if you want to take it home with you, you can. So that's what I ended up doing. And he would say a lot of the claims that Tori just went over, deep raspy voice, things of that nature. And this is one of the objects that we've tested. We would bring equipment over to it. So something called a natural EMF meter. So electromagnetic fields. Everybody has a natural magnetic field. The biggest natural magnetic source is, of course, the Earth. And, an inanimate object like this shouldn't have a natural EMF field. So when we put this meter up to it, it's 0, and every once in a while it would start fluctuating. The smell of campfire would come into the room and things of that nature, and just really strange paranormal experiences. Now, why something like this would be haunted? It was used in tribal ceremonies in Africa. So a lot of these masks, the reason why they were made is they were made to represent certain deity. And it was believed that sorry, get some interference here. It was believed that when the mask was made, it would possess the spirit of the certain deity that it was made for. And once the person put on the mask and started dancing, they would possess the spirit, and they would become the god or deity that the mask was representing. So this is the reason why it could absolutely be haunted.
So some of our claims have actually come true here. Some of the claims that the man has told us about. I believe you and Dustin Perry, good friend, was able to smell the campfire smell.
Absolutely, yeah. We have smelled it on quite a few occasions here.
And while leaving the museum, we actually heard a raspy voice not too long ago. So make note of that.
All right, let's go here.
So we have horror at the preschool. So a preschool in Connecticut had this doll named Jolene, and she was just kind of a nice addition to the preschool's play space. So she would sit on a chair, and all the students there would have a great time sitting with her, playing with her, and talking to her. Well, these teachers noticed that these children were actually having conversations with the doll, full-on one-sided conversations. And soon after they noticed this, the children would start crying and say that Jolene said some mean things to her, mean things to them, and made them actually very scared. So the teachers just kind of dismissed this until the next couple of mornings when they saw toys being moved overnight and the doll moving around the room. They'd find the doll sitting in a chair, and the next morning coming in and seeing it sitting on the ground across the room. So they called us.
Yeah, and when we went to pick up the doll, we of course drove to Connecticut and actually got to interview one of the staff members of the preschool, and you know, she was so petrified she didn't even want to touch the doll to bring it out to us. We had to go into the room and pick up the doll and bring it out to the car. So you could just see, you know, the fear in her eyes on how much this activity had progressed just in recent times.
Yeah, I mean, personally, having her here, we've had a lot of activity with her. We haven't heard the voices, we haven't had conversations, but we've seen her move a couple times. We actually took her chair once and put her on the ground to go use the chair to fix something else in the museum. And while turning around, maybe a minute after, she was sitting on the chair across the room, and we were in the same room and didn't hear anything. So she stayed true to her claim, and actually me and Cody sat there dumbfounded at how this doll was able to move so fast across the room.
Next year. All right, so the scaring stare. So this originated in Massachusetts, and this is a really odd story here. So this came from a family that a family of four, a mother, father, and two children. And the mother had acquired these masks at a second-hand store. She was walking through the store and claimed that the masks were kind of calling out to her, telling her to buy them. So she bought them on an impulse and brought them home. And she decided to hang them up in the hallway at her house. Now, one day she's in the kitchen washing dishes, and all of a sudden she hears one of her kids start screaming like they had gotten hurt. So she's scared. She drops everything she's doing, rushes over to the hallway, and you know, finds him on the floor crying. And she keeps asking him, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" He won't answer her. Finally, after she calms him down, 15 minutes later, she gets him to say a few words, and he says that the eyes have turned white. This is one of the masks here. The eyes have turned completely white, and the painted on pupils had disappeared, and that had scared him. So of course, kids have wild imaginations, and she just kind of put it off. And the following week, she's sitting on the couch, happens to glance up at the mask, and from a side view sees that she thinks the eyes are white. So she walks over to them, and you know, she's standing inches away from them and sees that the eyes are white on these masks. And you know, that of course frightened her. She took the kids, went into the basement, and waited till her husband came home. And as soon as he came home, she asked him to take the mask down. And what he did, he wrapped him up in a towel and put him in a box. Fast forward 15 years, they're moving houses, and they come across the box, and it brings back a whole bunch of scared memories, and they want to get rid of them. So they give us a call, and of course we pick them up.
So since having them, we have not seen their eyes turn white. We have not actually had any activity with these masks whatsoever. So as of right now, these claims are kind of up in the air. As of yet, we have not as of yet seen any activity.
So why something like this would be haunted? It was handmade. If you look on the back here, it has the inscription, the name Christine. Whether Christine is still alive or passed on, we're not really sure, but that's a possible reason as to why something could be attached to these objects here.
All right, so moving on, Tribal Torment. I'm loving these names. So this drum was actually a drum handed down to a young man who lived in Dartmouth, Mass. The drum was from his family, passed down from many generations to generations. And he decided that he wanted to keep it. It was a memory of his family and where he came from. So this African drum he brought home, and his girlfriend didn't like the drum at all. She didn't want it in their bedroom at all. So he set it out in another room. And that night at about 2 a.m., they woke up because they heard tribal drumming to a specific beat all night. So she was obviously frightened, but they kind of dismissed it. And for the next couple of nights, there was heavy drumming to a tribal tune. Every night they went to sleep. Their neighbor actually came over and told them that they needed to stop playing music because it was way too early in the morning, way too late at night, whatever. And he couldn't sleep. He needed to wake up for work. So instead of telling him that he had a haunted drum from his family, he decided to just say sorry and contact us with an email.
He did. And just to give you an idea of some of the emails that we get and what it's like to receive an email, I'm going to read you this email that was sent to us. Of course, the names have been changed for privacy reasons here. But my name is Michael, and I got your email address from a podcast you were recently interviewed on. You mentioned that you have some objects that people have given you over the years, so I thought I would give you that you would be the right person to contact since you are local. A few months ago, my girlfriend and I recently moved into our first apartment together in Dartmouth, Massachusetts. Everything was going great up until a few weeks ago when I brought my grandfather's drum home. He recently passed away. This drum originally belonged to his father, my great-grandfather, and was passed down from generation to generation. My mom was not interested in having it, so I took it. I always remember seeing it in his house when I was little, and I thought it would be a nice reminder of him. When I brought the drum home, I leaned it up in the corner of our bedroom. My girlfriend was not pleased, to say the least. She said the drum creeped her out and that she didn't want it in the bedroom. After arguing with her, I moved the drum into the living room to make her more comfortable. This is when things got really strange. We both were awoken around 2:30 in the morning to loud drumming noise coming from the living room. My girlfriend was in hysterics, and to be honest, I was quite freaked out at first. We both instantly knew what the sound was. We both quietly entered the living room, turning on every light as we walked. As soon as I turned the living room light on, the drumming stopped. We both were in shock and didn't know what to do. We ended up turning the TV on and eventually falling asleep. The next morning, I called my mom to tell her what had happened. My family has always been very spiritual and open to connecting with the other side. My mother explained that the drum was a very important part of making connections with the other side. The next few nights, the drumming didn't make any noise, but almost a week after the drumming started, again, around the same time. But this time I was awake. I am much more comfortable and interested with the situation than my girlfriend is. She woke up in a panic once again, and the drum soon after stopped. I tried to calm her down and told her it was okay, but she wanted no part of it. We got in a huge argument, and she said that she didn't want it in the apartment any longer, and it was either her or the drum. He had to pick one of the two. So it ended up happening again, and he ended up losing the battle, and the drum had to go because he wanted to keep his girlfriend. So he ended up contacting us, like Tori said, and we took the drum. And when we walked out, I couldn't believe that, he was handing us over this family heirloom that had been passed down. So I told him, if you ever change your mind and ever want to, come and grab it, you can. But I haven't heard from him in 3 years now.
We've heard some drumming. We've heard some drumming once or twice, but it was very quick.
All right, the cackling clown. So this was picked up at a market in Pennsylvania. And the story behind this, just a quick overview, is a gentleman that lives alone purchased the clown at the market here, a secondhand market. And he brought it to his house, put it on his bedroom nightstand, and was woken in the middle of the night to a loud maniacal laughter, as he explained it. He explained that it was coming from every direction in the room. He couldn't pinpoint where it was coming from. He opened his, he looked over to the left and looked at the clown, and he saw it sliding on the table a few inches, and that really freaked him out. He got scared and left and went to his brother's house for the night. And that's when we got the call. He happened to be a friend of a friend, and he knew the right person to contact, and we came and got it.
So why this may be happening, it could have been a previous owner or a series of previous owners, maybe passed down in a family before it ended up in this market. We have no clue, but we haven't had any activity yet.
All right, toe tag in the front yard. So this is a really interesting story from Woonsocket, Rhode Island. So we got a call from a woman who claimed that, she had found a toe tag, believe it or not, in her front yard. And if you're not familiar what that is, so when everybody passes on, you're given an identification number. This is the thing right here. And it's usually tied to one of your toes. And this is the number that stays with you to keep track for, medical purposes and things of that nature. And no matter if you're cremated or buried, this tag stays with you forever. And it should be buried with the person. There's no reason why it should be out. But this person found it in the front yard after they ended mowing their grass, and they thought it was a coin. So they picked it up. They thought they got lucky, and it ended up being a toe tag. They brought it into their home, and stuff started happening in their home. They would see footsteps and shadow people and things of that nature. And the whole reason why, how did this toe tag end up in the front yard to begin with, if it's supposed to be with the person? So in August of 1955, there was a big hurricane that had hit Rhode Island. There was actually two, one right after the other, about a week apart. And it dumped a total of 25 to 30 inches of rain. And all those conditions end up flooding all of the local rivers, the Blackstone River, Horseshoe Dam in that area, dislodged all of the caskets, and they started floating down the street, believe it or not. And this is confirmed with the police department and everything else. And, ended up in people's front yards. And the only thing they had back then was dental records. So a lot of the people didn't end up back in their graves. And it was a very unfortunate thing, but that's one of the possibilities on how this toe tag ended up in somebody's front yard.
So her claims included everything from footsteps around the house walking by her or into another room as she's going about her business, and shadow people that kind of walked around, maybe noticed her every now and then, but kind of went on their way. So we tend to think this is probably because she brought this toe tag into her home, and the spirit attached to this toe tag decided it wanted to come in also. We have seen shadow people. Whether it is associated with this tag, we have no clue, but it's a really nice piece to add to the collection.
And she hasn't had any paranormal experiences since removing it from her house. So that's a good thing for her and her family.
So the upside down girl, to give a quick overview, she came from a home in New Hampshire, and it was found hanging upside down while on its stand and giggling. So it was bought at an estate sale, and it's a beautiful doll, an absolutely gorgeous doll. But the only downside is, even though she is not weighted up top, she tends to somehow turn herself completely upside down. And actually, this claim is completely 100% true because we have weighted her. She's maybe a little heavy on the head, but not enough to turn her completely upside down. And we've had to resort to locking her in a case attached to a stand by her hips because she tends to lean forward and try to turn herself upside down. So we put her in a tight case, and now she only leans forward.
Yeah, and this is one of those few objects that we've actually experienced happening ourselves, which is interesting. Yeah, really, really weird. So why something like this would be haunted? It was purchased at an estate sale. Like I mentioned before, you're not really sure what different objects meant to certain people. And this might have meant a lot to somebody in the past. And when they passed away, somebody else bought it. This is another situation that once this doll was removed from the home, they've, lived a happy life and no longer scared.
Feel bad we turn her upside down, but she tends to try anyway. So Make It Stop. This is the story of a doll named Liza, and she's actually one of the most active pieces we have in this entire collection. She's a Victorian era doll that was given to us in Franklin, Massachusetts. And Cody actually received a call one day after appearing on a podcast of a person saying, "Make it stop, make her stop." And so Cody said, "Calm down, please just talk to me. Tell me what's going on." And so after he calmed down, he proceeded to tell Cody that this doll named Liza is talking to him. He's hearing voices in his head, and that the doll is telling him to do things to himself and others. Very, very bad things.
Yeah, and you could hear this in his voice that he was very, very scared. He tried to throw the doll away a few times, and it just would somehow appear back in his life. I believe the trash man ended up bringing it to his door, which is a really weird thing. So why this thing could be haunted? He wouldn't tell us where he got it from, and usually in our past experiences, when people are quiet on certain things, usually it's because they've done something that is either illegal or something that could be dabbling in occult and negative practices and things of that nature.
Actually, one thing that has happened is on the way to another haunted object event we were doing at another library. I was holding her and I got a weird feeling. So I said something to her. I forget along the lines of what I said. But that night, she must have been very upset because the strangest thing happened. There were 3 car accidents all right in front of us that night. And we were super late to that event, at least an hour late.
So whether that was connected or not, we're not really sure. But it's little things like that that make you really wonder. And the other interesting thing is this is something that we actually have video of moving inside of the museum. So we usually have cameras running 24/7 here to try catching and proving some of the claims that people have reported to us, and this was caught on one of our surveillance cameras and is totally legit. So we're going to play this video for you right now.
So as you can see, she's sitting to about the mid left, and you're going to see her adjust herself on camera in the middle of the night.
And then we'll get a little closer view of the arm there.
This was not sped up also. She adjusts herself and sits herself back down, as almost as if she really wanted to fix her posture. And now we were definitely not awake during this time. It was the middle of the night, early morning.
Yeah, so that's one of the few objects that we've been able to record. You know, it's really weird stuff, and it still gives me the chills to see that thing moving by itself. So let's go to the next thing here. So help me. What if you have a haunted object, or you think you have a haunted object?
So don't panic. Keep your feet on the ground, your head straight. Definitely think maybe I should keep a journal. Write down everything that's happening when it's happening. Maybe you're trying to see if this is just a routine pattern, if there's any sort of logical explanation for this, and really jot down if you think anything negative is happening.
And if you think it's a certain object, try removing it from your living space. Put it in a shed if you have a shed, or even in the basement to see if activity slows down or stops completely. Because when we remove these objects, usually everything stops within the house.
And obviously, if you love this object, don't worry about getting rid of it. If it's not something malicious, you do not have to get rid of it. But if you want to get rid of this object, we highly recommend that you contact us, and we could give it a great home and keep you in contact if you ever want it back.
And a lot of times we usually talk to people over the phone and convince them to keep it, because you know, this is usually stuff that belonged to their family and things of that nature. But if you do want to contact us, here's all of our contact information. And you know, just thank you so much for tuning in. And you know, we have so many more objects that we'd like to get to. If you check out some of our social media, we're posting short videos telling the backstories of some of the objects. So if you want more information on that end of things, feel free to look us up, or you know, just send us an email if you have a question.
And if anyone has any questions about any of the objects you see, any of the objects you've seen here, or just about us in general, feel free to ask.
Cool.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Cody Ray. Thank you so much, Satori. I thought that was a fantastic presentation. And let's get to some questions. Lots of questions in the chat.
Awesome.
Yeah, Jace would like to know, why do you think dolls are one of the most common haunted objects?
Great question. So I think pop culture has had a lot to do with that over the years. I think a lot of people claiming to have a haunted doll, but most likely the doll isn't haunted. I think it's like a novelty to most people, especially since all the movies have come out and all the publicity of Annabelle. It really all started with a Twilight Zone episode that aired a few years before the Warrens got Annabelle, and that kind of really created this whole craze of haunted dolls and things of that nature, and it just kind of snowballed with the Hollywood movies of Annabelle and things of that nature. So truly haunted dolls, I think, are rare. Some of the dolls we have here, I'm not really sure that they're haunted. People claim that they are, but like Tori said, a lot of the stuff hasn't happened here.
Only a few of them have actually stayed true to their claims in general. And yeah, I have to agree. I mean, there are even horror movies like with haunted dolls coming to life, and haunted dolls have always been in the spotlight when it comes to horror. I mean, if you also want to think historically, a lot of people collected these Victorian era dolls and these porcelain dolls because they were a prized possession to them. They loved collecting. So maybe also another reason could be they passed away with a prized collection of dolls and they wanted to stay attached to them.
JC would like to know, does a haunted object ever lose its hauntedness?
Yes, we have found that so a lot of times when it has to do with a family heirloom and things of that nature, the object does lose its attachment, because again, this was somebody's family member. They're not going to leave their family with the object. A lot of times they're going to stay with their family, especially if it's an intelligent spirit. You know, this object might mean a lot to them when they were alive, but their family means a lot more to them usually than the object. So we find that sometimes they leave the object and stay with their families.
And some of these objects that have stayed true to their claims, they're not to the extent of what these people that have claimed them have. It's like the drumming, it's not nearly as much as what the man that gave it to us said happened. So that could also be because it's a new location away from their family.
Yeah, it's like the perfect storm has to occur. It has to be the right people with the object, and sometimes we get lucky and have something move.
Karen has a question specifically regarding the African mask and the Rapsy voice. Can you make out what is being said, and is it in English or another language?
So it is. We believe it's in another language. We're not really sure what's being said. We're actually waiting to meet with somebody that can possibly translate what's being said or understand what's being said. It kind of sounds like mumbling. Most of the clips we've gotten, but we've gotten one clip that actually seems to say a few words, but we're not really sure, what's being said yet.
Mm-hmm. Ashley would like to know, in general, which investigation had the most impact on each of you and why?
You want to go first?
I would say there was an investigation in Massachusetts where a family had unfortunately lost a daughter tragically, and we investigated the home. They didn't believe it was her that was haunting the home because they had experiences before she passed away. And so being the tech guy, I went into the home, and they claimed that they had a shadow figure that moved on the bottom of the stairs. So I climbed to the top of the stairs, started setting up my camera to hopefully catch this shadow figure. And I heard a female voice say, are you going to be there on September 10th? And I was there personally in October, so I couldn't understand why. I thought this was one of my teammates talking. I couldn't understand why we were booking something almost a year away next September. So I stopped what I was doing. I turned and looked. I said, "What are you talking about?" And to keep the story short, they didn't say anything. I had heard this, and whenever I go on investigations, I always keep a voice recorder recording, and I put that recorder down right on the stairs before I set up the camera. As soon as I got home, I rewound the tape, and I hear a voice. Everybody can hear it saying September. I hear it September clearly. I didn't get the 10th part, but that really was an eye-opening experience because I actually heard that with my own ears. It wasn't recorded. It was recorded on an audio thing, but I actually heard this with my ears. And the daughter was around my age when she tragically passed away in Boston. She accidentally fell through an air conditioning duct on the top of a building in Boston and died instantly, unfortunately. But that was really eye-opening and emotional experience for sure.
For me, I grew up in, haunted locations. My family used to own a hotel in New Hampshire. That's actually where I had a lot of experiences myself. I actually was taught to knock on the doors before opening them to deliver towels to each hotel room because the spirits would lock the doors on us. So I would go in and forget to knock first, and you'd hear the little latch go, and I wouldn't be able to get in. So we had to have somebody crawl through the window. And, it was little experiences like that that really impacted me and really made me want to work in the paranormal.
Great. Jace would like to know, is it true that burning haunted objects, especially, and I can't pronounce things tonight, DesBiens boxes, make the haunting worse?
There have been cases where people have reported that it's worse. I mean, a lot of the belief is that a spirit, at least if it's possessing an object, is trapped within the object. With the Dybbuk boxes, it is thought and theorized that the spirit is actually inside the box, similar to how the jinn or genie is inside the lamp. So when burning the box, the spirit is released from the object itself, and now loose and able to do whatever it wants to do. So we have had cases that have gotten worse where people destroy objects.
But also, if you think on the case of Ouija boards and such, some people say you need to burn the board in order to get the negative energy away from you. So it's kind of hit or miss with certain objects.
Yeah, and it's all in beliefs as well, whatever you believe in.
Just a couple of comments regarding some folks who didn't realize that the real Annabelle was a Raggedy Ann doll. And then somebody mentioned that they actually saw Robert the Doll in a museum in Key West.
Yep.
And let's see here. So Karen has a, let's go to Tracy. So many questions. We're trying to get to them all. Tracy says, does keeping the doll or other haunted objects in glass protect people who are looking at them?
It depends on your belief, I think.
Yeah, I do believe it has something to do with belief. I think the glass, really doesn't do much. It mainly just protects the item itself, especially if it's an old delicate item. A lot of the items are old and really fragile and things of that nature. Some people believe, like Ed Warren would believe that the glass would. He put it in a blessed box that was blessed by a priest and whatever he believed in, and he believed that that box was a holy zone for this doll, and whatever was inside the doll was contained within that glass.
And it's not just about keeping the doll in the box too in the glass. It's also about, surrounding it with what you believe in. So for instance, we like to make sure everyone's comfortable when we do presentations. Sometimes we'll bring herbs, sometimes we'll bring, holy water if there are religious people in the crowd and stuff like that to make sure everybody's comfortable with the object.
Yeah, we do find different people are more sensitive to the objects than other people. We have had people come up to us with Liza there and say that, they can't stand to look at her and they need to leave.
She's evil and such.
And we've had others that are perfectly fine. I feel perfectly fine when I'm close to her. So it all depends on who you are.
Karen also wants to know, do you have any concerns that you have so many haunted objects in your home?
So I believe it's definitely with intent. My intent is that whatever's down here is going to stay down here. I've never had any trouble with things coming into our actual living space. It's kind of like what I mentioned before. If you think you have an haunted object, remove it from your living space and put it somewhere where you don't spend your time. I spend time here. This also serves as our office. It's just kind of one of those things that, you kind of have to put your shield up, whatever you believe in, whether it's prayer or white light, whatever you believe in. If you worship a tree, worship the tree and believe that that's going to protect you, and you should be okay. But I've never had any bad experiences yet, or good experiences here.
I think they like it down here.
Yeah.
Satori, you can answer this question if you'd like. Rachel would like to know, what hotel did your parents own in New Hampshire?
So it was called, I'm sure it's still called by this. It's not in use right now. It's known as the Spalding Inn. It was built around the 1800s, mid to late 1800s. And it actually had a lot of history there. My family owned it for quite a few years. I grew up there. We actually rebuilt the inside of it and kept its old glory. I hope one day, if I get enough money, I'll buy it back.
Someday.
And Gianna wants to, well, first of all, I was not familiar with Robert the Doll. So now I think I have a new potential Halloween costume on my hands. Gianna wants to know, if I took a picture of the slide with Robert the Doll on it, will bad things happen to me?
I'm not sure.
I don't believe so. I definitely don't think so. I think you have to be, present with the actual object, because if Robert the Doll truly possesses the spirit of somebody, or evil spirit, or whatever, he is with Robert the Doll. This slide isn't, possessed or haunted by anything. So I think you'd actually have to go to the museum to actually have that possible experience encounter.
If you want to ever test that theory, you're welcome to. And if anything happens, please contact us. I'd love to hear it.
But I don't think anything's going to happen. You have nothing to worry about.
All right. I think we've gone past our 10 minutes here. I'll do 30 seconds to sort of pump up your egos here, guys. Gail says, thank you. Way cool. Rachel says, thank you. Very interesting. Mary says, thank you. Fascinating presentation. Karen says, very interesting presentation. Ashley says, really enjoyed the presentation. Thank you so much, Cody and Satori. Judith says, thank you. This was great. Betty says, great presentation. Nancy says, thank you for the great presentation. Heidi says, wonderful. Heather says, awesome presentation. And I can go on and on. We have GJ saying, thank you from Milwaukee. Lots of positive comments. So we'll wrap it here. So Cody and let me see here. Yeah, I will end it there. So right. Cody and Satori, did you have any last words, any parting words you wanted to leave to the group?
Well, if you have cable and if you have the Travel Channel, be sure to tune into Ghost Nation. There's a new episode on tomorrow night. I believe at 9 o'clock.
I believe so, depending on where you.
Yep, we're not on that episode. I believe the next time one of us is featured on an episode will be in November. I believe the 14th. So if you want to tune in on the 14th,
it's going to be a great season.
It's great episode, actually involving possible haunted objects at an antique store. So
stay tuned, and if you ever want to get in contact with us, you have all of our information. Feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much, guys.
Great. Thank you, Cody. Thank you, Satori. Thank you, everyone, for listening here live on Zoom. Great turnout. And thank you, everyone who listened on YouTube as well. And I hope everyone has a wonderful evening, and I hope they enjoy the Halloween season. And we'll see some of you back for Jeff Belanger next Wednesday. So thanks again, guys, and everyone have a great night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.